Good afternoon, beloved community. I'm Melissa Miller, host of The Chosen Heroes. And happy May 4th. For people like me who like Star Wars, may the 4th be with you. So we have a really great episode today. We have Griffen Herchko as our guest, and he's going to tell us his targeted story, which I think you will really get a lot of value out of hearing this. Again, we're all in this together, and we just have to keep up the good fight. So let's kick off the episode with a targeted justice week and review with an awesome video made by Sean Burton. He is just so talented.
It's that time again for the Targeted Justice newsletter, the video edition. May 4th, 2025. Let's get the word out. Microwave weapon attacks on 278,000 U.S. civilians. This is real. Names are being illegally placed on the terror watch list TSDB, codes 3 and 4. There are 278,000 illegal FISA warrants. Kash Patel, please make this a priority. www.targetedjustice.com/microwave-burns. Contact each one of these top conservative media sources. Thank you so much to two of our amazing team members, Fernando and Jill. You guys rock. We continue to receive requests from targeted individuals that want legal advice or call Ana Toledo to take their case. Reminder, we have more than 21,000 subscribers and members. Targeted Justice cannot and does not give legal advice. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are not a law firm or a medical clinic. Even though two of our board members are medical doctors, they cannot give medical advice to non-patients. Dr. Len Baer cannot give you medical advice either. He is retired. Ana Toledo is already working more than 80 hours per week. It does not matter how great your evidence is, she cannot take your case. Her legal efforts are for the benefit of all TIs. Any attorney that represents you must be licensed in your state. Ana is not licensed in 49 states. She's only licensed in one district in Texas, not the entire state. She cannot give you legal advice. You need to make an effort to get the attention of an attorney willing to represent you. You need to call attorneys licensed in your state. There are free legal clinics with attorneys in every state. Look them up online. Take some of our flyers with you. If you are listening to the alternative media, you will surmise that Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy Jr. are slowly dismantling the deep state. We urge you to check out thegatewaypundit.com and zerohedge.com. The time has come for you to make an effort. Do not back down. That is what they were counting on. Targeted Justice is not a government organization. Unlike ACLU, we do not have a $1 billion endowment from donors and grants. Yet we do the work that they are not willing to do, fight to liberate from torture the most disenfranchised. We receive no funding from the government. Our board of directors and volunteers are not paid for their work. The program will shut down for everyone or no one. These are our only two choices. At Targeted Justice, our efforts will never be about just one person. Calling all digital warriors. Please share, repost, copy and paste this video and the text of this newsletter onto Twitter, Facebook, Truth Social, TikTok, etc. They will block it if you just post the link. We are still looking for volunteers. Let us know how you can help. What skill sets do you have? Write to tjustice2@proton.me. Put volunteer in the subject line. You can watch targeted justice videos on Rumble by going to the following link, https://rumble.com/user/real targeted justice/channels. Please consider donating. Targeted Justice is nonprofit. The donations are tax deductible. Go to either https://pay.cornerstone.cc/targetedjustice or https://www.patreon.com/targetedjustice. You can also send a check to Targeted Justice, P.O. Box 15990, Houston, Texas 77220. Buy some cool gifts and t-shirts from Targeted Justice store by going to https://targeted-justice.printify.me/products or https://www.bonfire.com/store/targeted-justice-products. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. God bless.
All right, great information. I just want to give a shout out to Target Source LLC. Armando is the creator of the Silent Night, which I use that device. For those who have been looking for some shielding, I encourage you to reach out to Armando at silentnight.source@gmail.com with any questions regarding any of his products. And you can also visit the webpage at targetsourcellc.com. And I want to give a shout out to Tranquility, who does a wonderful job organizing all things related for TI events.org. This is a wonderful website. I cannot say it enough. You must plug in with our community. Do not fall into the trap of isolation. You have to plug in with people who understand what you are going through. And by attending these events, then you are able to keep plugged in. And when you are able to hear the stories of others, you are immediately breaking down more walls of barriers that the confines of these programs put us in. So again, definitely reach out. If you don't have an event in your area, why not be the one who starts it? Tranquility has a guide on tievents.org that will teach you how to set up a meetup or a conference call within your area, so that you be that one, that innovative person that makes that first step and makes it happen. Just wanted to announce some upcoming guests and events. Next week on The Chosen Heroes will be Sterling Battelle. He is a targeted firefighter, and his story is going to be one you want to engage in and take a listen, because there are so many first responders that are under attack, but again, not knowing what and why this is happening to them. So tune in. On the 18th, Harold Brims, he is our VP for Europe for Targeted Justice. He will be joining us, so don't miss out on that, because I appreciate all the worldwide viewers that we have for The Chosen Heroes, and Harold is such a great representation for Europe. We have so many. Targeted justice is just growing in different countries. So it's a true blessing. And it is, God's way of making it happen, and our voice is heard. Other events, next Saturday, we have two things going on. My bi-weekly teleconference with Jamie Rice. That is the Targeted Individual Combat Training. This is taking you into debunking the mind control programs and the AI by, the journey of inner healing, which is just necessary. In these sessions, you are taught so much and about reprogramming your mind to be in that receptive to receive the good, as God does the heavy lifting. If you have not checked it out, the first 3 sessions that I've done with Jamie are on my YouTube page. And if you are wanting to participate, just send me an email at chosen_heroes@proton.me. Also, next Saturday on the 10th is Targeted Justice Texas TI monthly meetup, which is every second Saturday of the month at Onion Creek Cafe in Houston, Texas. Anna Toledo will be there along with Richard Lighthouse and myself. So please join in. It's always a good meetup. And anyone looking to volunteer, I'd really like to get some musicians on board with the Chosen Heroes. You know, music is so therapeutic. I'm looking for other volunteers as well. Just send me an email at the Chosen Heroes link. And then here are all the ways that you can subscribe, follow, and like, and share for the Chosen Heroes. All right, before we bring up the special guest, we're just going to go into, my weekly word and guidance and prayer. And I'm just going to play a little bit of background music because I was really overcome by the presence of God and the universe this morning. And I want everybody to take away from today that don't ever give up on hope, because God's got his hands in this. Many paths and stories have led us to all of us to where we are right here today, sharing in this experience together, lifting one another up with compassion as we know what the daily trials of being a targeted individual entails. Navigating through this course successfully is dependent on us connecting with God and a higher power. We got to press in for that because the enemy wants to rob us from it. And that connection with that higher power and God is our way out and through this. We have to also bravely embark upon the journey within to release the baggage we carry that is used against us, that no longer serves our greater good, our highest good. We must free up space for God and the universe to move radically throughout our lives as he battles in the spirit realm against all that has come against us. We must surrender to how we envision things unfolding, for we are robbing ourselves of true divine intervention by clinging on to how we cognitively think things should resolve. God's unfolding a plan that is so far greater than what our mortal flesh can envision. 1 Corinthians 3:9, for we are God's fellow workers. We are God's field, God's building. We are building up his kingdom. Mankind and all of its ill purposes has waged a war against God's creation. And we stand on God's promise, Romans 1:18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. And God is the blade cutting from the heavenly realm through the deception, agendas, and bodily attack and invasion against the innocent. So if you will with me in prayer, God, we surrender all our pain, trauma, and suffering this targeting experience has brought us. We lay it at your feet, for this burden is too much for us to carry alone. We invite you, God, into our heart. Let your anointing flow into our hearts and body, releasing and freeing us from fear, oppression, addictions, mindsets, and judgments. Give us discernment, God. Give us the eyes to see the next action steps we must take. What has been broken can be rebuilt into true beauty. Give us ears that only hear your guidance. Fill our cups with joy, grace, and compassion for ourselves. Remind us of what it is like to be covered by your presence. Let us see ourselves the way you do, with your loving kindness, always supportive and fierce protection. We ask our ego and will to step aside as we surrender all areas of our life for you to enter and move mountains. We give you permission for you to intervene on our behalf as you know what is against us. Your plan is the plan our eyes seek to see unfold. You know the jackals that scoff at us and their actions. We ask for you to intercede with all traps set against us. We claim victory in your name, Father God. We are the beacon of light. You are our beacon of light that we follow. We stand on your word and your promise to set the captives free. You will make our enemies the example. You will make the impossible possible. You will turn the rain into sunshine. We will witness the supernatural flow of your work within our lives. You breathe life back into us and restore our soul and our hope and our passion, our passionate drive to live in a way that we have yet to know. All of heaven unites in our protection in the days ahead. By your glory and grace. Amen. We must continue to forge on. We are making a dent in this battle, and God just asked us to do our part. We got to take care of ourselves. We need to stand up against this Goliath that God is moving and shifting things in the spiritual realm. And our voice is our most powerful weapon. And as we use our voice, we need to take care of our own temple. Amen. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, Griffen Herchko. So I want, before I bring him to the stage here, give you a little background on Griffen. And he is a dynamic solution specialist with extensive experience delivering turnkey solutions and strategies across various industries. 2 decades of project management, sales, and operations, where he successfully led large-scale projects and cultivated lasting client relationships. He is often recognized for his ability to adapt to complex challenges driven by natural aptitude for analyzing problems holistically, breaking them down into core components to develop solutions. And I'll let Griffen explain this, but as fate would have it, he met a woman and he got taken down the journey that led him into this targeting experience. So Griffen and I had met prior to the podcast and had a good conversation, and we felt it would be best if we broke his story into like a mini series. There's so much. And so the first step is we're going to take the introduction of how this all began for Griffen. And because he has done so much extensive research on the technology, he has a motion filed against the person who did this targeting, responsible for his targeting. There's so much there. So we want to break this into this mini series because this story is evolving in real time. So let's bring Griffen to the stage. Hi, Griffen.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining in today. So,
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Yes, I'm so thrilled to have you here. So how about you just kick us off and tell us.
Well, this is like something I have never ever had to deal with before. I mean, I'm good with problems. I'm good with solving problems, but when it's a problem with technology, humanity, government, legislation, I mean, this thing is woven into so many fabrics, but it's wild. I'll tell you, it's been one crazy journey moving through this process. And in the beginning of it, there was a lot of, confusion. I mean, when this thing finally started to lay on me. So I made a lot of mistakes. I went through a lot of processes to try and galvanize myself to a point where I can actually make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like I can't even save the next guy next to me. I'm just trying to work as hard as I can on my problem. And in doing that, I'm finally getting into a position where I'm able to help other people. So, but telling these stories and getting it out to the public so that they can kind of get a firsthand look at how somebody can even become a targeted individual. What does that even mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does that even imply? That's why I'm really here. People got to understand what's going on in the world today.
Right. There's just too many of us that this is happening to, and we have to unite and get our story out. And our voice is the weapon against all of this. And I appreciate you coming here today to share your story. So, can you tell us when you realized that you were targeted and what led up to that realization?
So between fourth quarter of 2018 and 2020, so we're looking at a year and a half of time, this process started to sink in. So when it first happened, it it just seemed normal, right? I was involved with the family. I was involved with that girl. There was a problem with the family, right? They had a criminal problem that they were trying to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And in this weird circumstances, the girl I was dating ends up going to the hospital. So I'm left alone in her apartment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of property that's stolen that's sitting in the apartment. And then the family wants to come in and get rid of me and move the property to another location. So I was just sitting there in the middle of it. And the only thing I knew is that at the time, my girlfriend wasn't really happy with what was going on with her family.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She had a lot of horror stories. She's got a lot of trauma from the past. So
Mm-hmm.
when they showed up, I was like, I'm not leaving. And then it got bad, violence, and then the police got called, and then we just went through these escalating stages,
Mm-hmm.
and I won every one of them. Right? Police sided with me. Police told everybody to get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the guy that was heading this was an engineer working in the aerospace industry. Now, to me, it's just another guy. He was kind of a yeah, I won't say anything. Anyway, you sort of way. But 4 hours after the police kick everybody out, these people come back, right? They come back into the apartment. They're only in there a couple of minutes. It was the other guy that I was living with, my girlfriend. He let him in. They put something in the apartment. I didn't know what it was. I thought they were just there to do something else. And then, they scurry out the door. After they left, literally, I get this high pitched ring. It's not even in my ear, but it's like you could just hear it, like a
Mm-hmm.
static background. And then that starts to subside, and then I can literally hear somebody talking to me. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is all taking place across from LAX. So I'm in a sound reinforced apartment because I don't know if anybody's ever heard one of those jets take off, but it gets pretty loud.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to hear somebody just talking to me, like clearly, it's not like you would hear a normal voice. It's crunched down. It's you could hear it. It's
Mm-hmm.
right on top of everything else, but
Right.
you can't really put a location on it. It's not like, oh, I'm hearing a voice from the left, or I'm hearing a voice from the right, or I'm hearing a voice from, a certain location. It's just there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just trying to tell me, they were telling me to get out of the apartment. It's just like, you got to get out of the apartment. You got to get out of the apartment. You got to leave. And then they cycled through some sound fonts. So I think they told me to get out of the apartment in Peter Griffin's voice. So, It's pretty but with today's technology, you can literally, say anything you want and have the audio come out in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, so this goes on for quite some time. And maybe I put up with it for like 7 or 8 minutes. And I'm just amazed. I'm not really scared at this point because
Mm,
none of this actually is painful. It's just like hearing, it's just like walking around. You don't actually feel any type of physical effect on your body. There's no headache or pressure when it's used as a communication system. So I'm just sitting here listening to the harassment, but then I decided to see if it was like, if they can you hear me? So I ended up asking, why? Because they kept asking me to leave the apartment. So I was like, why? And when I said why, all the audio stopped. And it was just for like almost a minute. So then I just asked why again. And it
mm,
was almost another minute of nothing.
mm-hmm.
And then I got a reply because I'll be in trouble for drug possession. So I was like, oh, that's kind of creepy. Like, apparently they can hear me, but then I was like, there's no drugs. I don't have any drugs. But then I realized that those guys were just in the house. So I did a quick search. I ended up finding this conspicuously placed clear plastic container, popped it open. Honestly, I'm no stranger to, drugs, so I'm just gonna throw that out there. But put my finger in it, put it to my tongue, bam, best baking soda I ever tasted. It was baking soda.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, look, guys, you're gonna have to do better than that. And at that point, that's when the actual attack happened. I mean, it happened so fast. You get pressure in your skull. I got a piercing. It felt like someone was putting an ice pick in my ear. It felt like someone was putting an ice pick in one of my eyes.
Mm,
And then I felt like my abdomen, like literally had electrical current running through it. It felt
mm-hmm.
like that seize was taking place, and that was, fight or flight at that moment. So
Yeah.
I just picked up the phone, called 911. And being that I was sitting on top of all that property, and that property was attached to, a criminal case ongoing with the family, um, I assumed that that's why the attack stopped. Because as soon as I picked up the phone and got 911, like all of that went away.
Mm-hmm.
From that moment, I didn't. My government hadn't told me anything. Right. I heard stories about, the voice of God weapon. I've been in the sound industry for over 20 years, so I understood about, sound generation and sound projection and sound beaming, but I didn't ever have any type of inclination to think that there was some type of targeted world. Like, I didn't even know what a targeted individual was.
Mm-hmm.
So at this moment, when this all took place, I was just looking at it as a prank from an engineer that was, they had cool toys. And since nothing came of it after that, right, I got my computer network hacked the next day. They ended up taking a photo of Candace, it was semi nude, and that was it. And then I got a little warning that said, like, look, straighten up and fly right, was basically like, we're watching you. And that was it. And then everything was normal for the rest of the time. There was no issues, no auditory issues, no nothing. It just, Candace came back and we continued on with our relationship. So I didn't really have anything to, squawk about, really. I
Mm-hmm.
just had gotten into a little rumble, and it just, everything worked out and everything was fine. So you let a year go by, and then, me and Candace got into some relationship troubles.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, she ended up getting incarcerated. I ended up losing a lot of money. And in that process, I confided in another woman and we slept together.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my mistake. But now we're a year later, 4 hours after that happened, I'm waking up to the system again. Like it is literally, projecting in. I can literally hear this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's trying to make it sound like there is an argument going on between two people, which I'm hearing this. So my brain is immediately reaching for who this could be, right? I hear the audio. I hear one person complaining that he wants to come into the house and he wants to, attack me because I'm cheated on his sister. And the other voice is fighting against it, saying that's illegal. You can't come in here. You can't have all this. So in my mind, you're led to believe that, I got an Airbnb owner now struggling with some weird assailant that's maybe related to Candace or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just put my pants on and went to the door to deal with it. There was nobody there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nobody.
So at that time, did you like, oh wow, this has come back, and it
Well,
probably never left you to begin with. They were still, like they said, watching you, right?
so right, and I see this is early stage. So,
Mm-hmm.
when somebody says like, "Oh, be watching you," it's just like, okay, buddy, like,
Right.
whatever, like,
Yeah.
that's fine. You're gonna be watching me, but none of this, and it was still almost a year after this that this whole concept of surveillance, how the system works, what the system does, how it integrates with the body, you know, people aren't quite grasping the full connection. So, you have people that are talking about V2K. So when I hear about voice to skull, I think of that as it's one way, right? When I talk about V2K, I'm talking about putting the voice in the person. So, the only way God made us is to hear sound is through our auditory cortex. If that auditory cortex doesn't get a signal, you don't get the perception of sound. And when people say, like, oh, that bird made sounds, technically, not really. The bird emitted energy. That energy disturbed your body. You have
Mm-hmm.
a special organ that reads that energy.
Mm-hmm.
That energy gets turned into an electrical signal.
Right.
That electrical signal goes all the way up your vestibulocochlear nerve and goes into your brain. Then your brain processes that pattern, and then all of a sudden you hear, the bird
Mm-hmm.
tweeting. So you have this perception of sound, and this system can stimulate the body in a select nerve or select network without disturbing the other networks to
Mm-hmm.
produce that sound. Then, if you can do that, if you're using energy to stimulate the body, then the opposite can also occur. You can read energy that's moving through that system and you can detect it. And if you can process it, you then have an in and an out. And this was what took a lot of time for me is that while I'm sitting here conscious, everything's live to me, but there is almost between 2 to 500 millionths of a second of everything that I'm doing. My body has to start the process for before it happens. So even before I hear my voice in my ear or in my head, my body has to kick off a signal to get
Right.
all of this moving down here. And that little gap of time that predates our consciousness, that's where this system is just able to take advantage of that. So our nerves only move at signals at 267 miles an hour. Electromagnetic radiation moves at 186,000 miles a second. So when you think about, well, what can you really do in 200 millionths of a second? It's like, well, you can travel 37,000 miles if you're moving at the speed of light.
Yeah.
You know, you can process, billions, billions
Mm-hmm.
of units of information per, in that little quadrant of time.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about how much information our nerve systems are providing, it's not, the brain does all of this with next to nothing. I mean, your hearing only sends 36, maybe 37 signals a second. That's not really a lot compared to today's computing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you tie all that together, you have a surveillance system by default. You can literally just web into somebody and you start to have that ability to track them. And then you also get by default a weapon system. So, and this is what took a lot of time for me to put together with
Mm-hmm.
um, the Havana syndrome and seeing victims like Dr. Len Bear and seeing all of our, U.S. diplomats that were talking about this in the early days, like, look, I got attacked. And then our government's like, no, you didn't get attacked. And
Mm-hmm.
then they're all like, we got attacked. And, it's just like, why are they denying this?
Mm-hmm.
But from my perspective, going through this, it makes sense. You can't tell the world that you built a system that robs everybody of their, civil liberties.
Yes.
So, and that took a lot of time to kind of fall into.
Process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I wasn't looking at the world from any of these views. I was just a guy who did something wrong, who now knew somebody else knew, and they had I wouldn't say a sense of humor, but they were going to be dealing with this in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately, of course, I told the girl that I was with, like, look, I need to go. Went back. I got back together. Well, when Candace got out of jail, we got back together and we were talking about this. I was racked with guilt. She was racked with the fact that it caused all these problems. And we just kind of, in that moment, I'm sorry, but I didn't want to say anything. Just, I was guilty of that. And they ended up giving me a very wealthy amount of time to do something. But my not going forward and telling Candace what I had done started this next process, to begin again. And I also figured out that whoever, they weren't going to tell Candace either. So we had this standoff where I'm not going to tell her
Mm-hmm.
based on my reasons. And if you can't tell her, then there's something that's preventing you from, just coming out in the open and saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is basically the crux that wound me into my targeting experience. And
So you were experiencing like the intermittent, and then obviously they'd been watching you for some time. Do you think that before this even happened to you, you might have been watched due to there was, stolen property and such involved in the situation, and by monitoring, someone was monitoring that, and then you were kind of brought in because of the association with your girlfriend at the time? Do you think that that could have been a possibility, that maybe even before it even occurred the first time, that you were already being monitored?
uh, you know, I- this thing could have been on me at birth. I would have never known it.
True, right.
I
Until
mean,
it gets activated, right.
right. So,
Or makes itself known, I should say. Yeah.
right. It's just like I don't walk around my house feeling Wi-Fi. I don't walk around my house. I can go outside and feel the sun.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a strong enough energy that I can feel the sun, but I
Mm-hmm.
just don't feel Wi-Fi. I don't feel my cell phone connection our local radio stations, WNCI, that's pumping out a massive signal. I don't feel that, running through my body.
Right.
So when you think about what can you really do with electromagnetic radiation, what
Mm-hmm.
can you really do with, fields, you know, there's a lot that the general public hasn't really wrapped their heads around. Most people know how to operate a cell phone. Most people have no clue how a cellular network is actually feeding information back and forth. I mean, it's absolutely amazing what you can do. And it looks like we've just gotten to the point where neurophysiology and the science behind how our actual nervous system works, how the electrical components that divide the frequencies between like your eye works at a certain frequency, your ear works at a certain frequency. We've just started to get to the point where we're able to, get into these little avenues where we can connect to it now.
Mm-hmm.
Because today, my targeting is, this is basically what my punishment was. We're just going to skip right to the end result real quick. I can talk without moving my mouth, and I can hear the audio that's provided for what I want to say. And something out there will respond to anything that I tell it. Like I can literally ask it, how's the weather right now? And it can literally just respond right back. I don't give, a crap about what the weather is, maybe go outside and you figure it out. It'll just talk to you. And I mean, and it's always there to talk to you, but it's not there to talk to you in any capacity that is useful. So it's not going to be your chat GPT. You're not going to be able to use it. Like if I go in, like I need to take a test, like, oh, all right, here's question A, here's question B, here's question C.
Right.
For
Yeah.
it's not going to do any of that for you. It's just there
It's like an
to,
AI chatterbox, right?
it really is. It wasn't always, but at a
Right.
certain
Yeah.
at a
But you
certain point,
also still have live feeds from, what some call a handler, right? The one that is doing live interaction with you that is not the typical AI chatter, right? Do you have that as well?
there is no more all the little stuff that surrounded like my early targeting, and we'll get into that. All of it's gone. So where I'm at now, we have a serious problem when it comes to I know how I was introduced to the problem. I know the man who introduced the problem to me. I know the reason and the motives behind it. And where this standoff is that his position is I have to be able to call me crazy, right? Oh, you have the voice, you can talk. All of this has to sound crazy to the public.
Mm-hmm.
My standpoint is I'm just going to tell the truth. This is all going to slowly come out. And at the end, we're going to know that you're connected somehow to this bubble. So, and that's kind of how power works. Power isn't in technology. Power isn't in anything but people. People are what are contain power or have power.
And the
When
man that was responsible for enrolling you into this, I should say, he was the brother of the girlfriend that you had cheated
yes,
on.
yes, he was. He's kind of like the patriarch of the family. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I always had respect for him. I always thought engineers were cool. But it's just I didn't realize how much the trauma that the family had gone through in their past might have affected other members of their family. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this guy really has a deep-seated hate for me that's almost unnaturally unnatural. But it also makes sense because all the things that you would need to keep, like that war going on, he has to say and do. He has to go out and call me crazy. He has to take every mistake I've made and find a way to wedge it against me. He has to do these things in order to hold that bubble
Right.
in the minds of his family, in the minds of his coworkers, his colleagues, because at the end of the day, somewhere he is attached to one of the world's, like, our current day greatest human rights abuse. Because
Hmm.
this thing, there's no civil liberty, there's no autonomy. It knows everything that you do. It knows everything that I wouldn't say it knows what you're thinking, but people need to start looking at the human mind and the brain in a different way. You know, if you think spoon, it'll know you're thinking of spoon.
Right.
But if you're trying to solve a math problem, this thing is blind as a bat. I mean, the moment where you're deciding to, you know, that you're hungry, it can probably detect hunger because that's a signal. But if you're pondering like Genghis Khan's conquest in the 1970s and you're trying to, it knows you're thinking. It just does not know, you know,
The
doesn't know what's
precision is not that at that level. It's
right.
more kind of high level. And again, scanning and knowing and stealing, all your past history and insecurities, fears, or whatever. I think they have a general checklist of, okay, in terms of the chatter bot
Well,
stuff.
the longer it's on you, the
Hmm.
more it knows.
Yeah, because you're
And the
teaching
more it
it.
knows, the
It's
better it
AI is
works.
learning. AI is learning
Yeah.
you. So to counter AI, you've got to be sporadic. You've got to, get out of your own rut and your own patterns, right? So because you're teaching it, that's that's the bottom line. It's learning. Your last reaction is its next move. You know?
It's pretty impressive. On a linguistic side, it still makes mistakes.
Mhm.
So, right, so if I'm talking in it, using the system to talk, all right, and I want to say I want to go to the park and have a hot dog, I can say that. Now, let's say I want to say I want to go to the park and walk a dog. Now, what I did there is I screwed up the meaning of the sentence or how the sentence sounded phonetically. This thing cannot produce anything other than the intended sentence I was going to say. There's no way to blur the word, so to speak. If I'm thinking I want to go to the park and walk the dog and eat, and I try to screw that up in any way, it won't allow that to occur. And it's kind of weird, but it's just a communication system. I don't think they ever designed it to, want to screw anything up. I mean, this thing has spoken to me perfect English since day one that it started. It has never missed a beat. It has never taken a breath. It has never had any type of stuttering or any type of problem in that regard. So when it comes to it being human, I don't think that it really has to be relegated to somebody watching you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It, it,
Right. Yeah, because
it, it
that's impossible. So I think that there is live interaction time. It is for me, with the auditory effect. Um, and when you do something outside of the normal, it is very silencing and it takes it a while to recoup from that latest event because it wasn't predicting it, it wasn't expecting it. That is what I'm an analyst, so I try all types of things. I'm constantly measuring and testing its own response. If it's going to monitor me, I'm going to monitor it. I'm going to pattern recognition. All of those things are great teachers to you and knowing what you're up against and what you're dealing with on a regular. I've been at this for a very long time. It's been since 2012. So
it's it is. I am still shocked that you know. Well, I mean, they got it working to a certain degree. I'm amazed at how well it actually works, but once you start to tear the layers back on it, it's not as, I mean, what's the word? It is intrusive. I mean, there's
Oh,
no doubt
right.
about it. But it's not as smart as it guess it could be. Thank God,
I think
you
it's
know.
mediocrity.
But for a lot of people, they get it's enough to confuse them. It's enough to
Well, yeah,
literally lead them down a road
yeah.
that,
In the beginning, it's got its greatest power over you
oh yeah,
and to control you. But once you come to terms with the fact that it's not going away, and that you need to start picking up on how your interaction, your reaction, your emotional state, and what leads up to the statements that it says right before those remarks start coming in. And again, your routine and what it predicts you're going to do versus deviating from that. I mean, that's when you have to become the analyst and the experimenter and to understand, engage what it is and what it isn't capable of doing. Um, at that point, when you get to that point, then it's lost its power over you, and you are in the observer seat of it, and how you react and you choose and your next move is how it's going to respond.
and
So
that's what took me a lot of time
I got
to
really stuck
learn.
on that.
Like, oh my gosh, because my first inclination, well, this is where it got weird for me. I was pinned to my own lie. So I couldn't even talk about what was going on to anybody, especially the girl I was with, because I wasn't trying to admit this,
Exactly.
and
So
they
at
knew
once,
that.
so
They,
but you
so,
you did eventually tell her, right?
well, see, so yes, I eventually told her, but I waited. I wasn't going to tell her. I mean, I could have gone the rest of my life and just privately made up for it. I did love Candace, but I just didn't want to hurt her like that. So
Hmm.
I found a way to just, fine, that was it. But they weren't going to have that. So, as time passed, then the attack started again. Well, harassment, whatever you want to call it. But the first wave was just 2 weeks of intermittent popping in out of nowhere and basically explaining in the nicest way possible why is it that I should, leave her. So it literally, and it played on all my heartstrings. It was just, some guy talking to me, telling me like, look, you know, it really isn't going to be a good idea if you two stay together. You should be an honest person. You should, confront this, and you should find it's literally like 5 minute window on a Tuesday, 5 minute window on a Wednesday, 5 minute window on a Thursday. And I
Hmm.
just had to deal with these impact shots throughout the course of a few weeks.
Hmm.
But nobody told Candace, so I wasn't going to tell Candace. And I was like, okay, this is going to end at some point, I guess, but might as well find out where this is going, because at the same time, 20 years in the audio industry, this is really cool technology. Like, right? It wasn't being used to hurt me, so I was kind of just in this weird juxtapose of just dealing with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. I wasn't going to go run to the police and, hey, somebody's talking to me with, I can hear them. It's just like, well, where are they? Like, why
Hmm.
can you? I wasn't there yet. 2 weeks goes by. I don't do anything. They just called it quits. So now I'm back to a, baseline where I don't have any contact with anybody.
Hmm.
And then it starts up again.
Hmm.
This time, there is no more reference to Candace at all. This time, the audio harassment is truly like harassment, but it's not even centered towards me. What they did was basically they took a skit It's the only way I could explain this. If you could imagine a TV show where there are five kids and they had broken into a storage facility and they found a technology inside the storage facility, then they stole it, and then they slowly started to find out that it could connect to other people. That's literally what I was forced to hear over like 2 weeks, is this building of this story,
Hmm.
and that's all it was. I mean, I was like, what in the world is this have to do with anything? But
That's
that's
so interesting that you say that, because in the very beginning of mine, the dialogue was like a skit of just ignorant people, thinking that they were powerful and being able to play with something like this. And, that I mean, it did. It
uh,
did. It started out kind of like that. Yeah. And as you're listening to this retardedness go on about these people that obviously agreed to do and participate in something, and just thinking that they were special and invincible. And, because when I had picked up the phone, I actually had a hardwired landline tap. I mean, they were going old school, right? They were this, it evolved into all of this different stuff, right? But they actually did a physical hard landline tap where you pick up the landline and it goes click, 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 click. So I had been researching surveillance technologies and knew that clicking was a tap. So I bought a device, plugged it in, had headphones, turned it on. This is before I got the auditory effect. And here it was, just a bunch of ignorants having a conversation, going, what is that device that she's using? And when I heard them talking, I called 911, and they were like, oh my gosh, I gotta tell my dad. Oh my gosh, she's calling the police. I mean,
oh
she's
my gosh,
told. It was really like Mickey Mouse, peanut gallery, mediocrity sandbox stuff going on there.
it
Because it
was.
got, yeah, so I think it's just one of those angles.
I think looking back at it, I think it kind of psychologically preps the victim. So
Hmm.
victims deal with things however they're going to deal with them based off of their, you know, traits, their skills, where they're at in life, all of that. You know,
Hmm.
I was dealing with this just blasé, right? Because I looked at it like, look, there's no harm, there's no impact, I don't feel pain. This is just annoying. But even the audio itself is overlaid on top of everything naturally. So, the only thing I could do is get distracted through listening to it. But if you've ever met Candace, that girl can talk. So anytime I just wanted to not deal with it, if it was happening, I just, I had her right there to just, you know, blah, 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 blah. Loved it. I never had anything, it was never a dull moment with that girl.
Hmm.
But this finally gave away to another period of silence, right? I can't even remember how it ended. Somehow they connected to it, or somebody touched a button, and like all of a sudden it got fried, and then it was just like somebody had broken it. So now we're at another 2 weeks of nothing. It's just baseline again. And then it starts again. Except this time I am being talked to. So now somebody is directly talking to me,
Hmm.
and I have no ability to talk back. It doesn't represent in any way, shape, or form the ability to understand me, or it's not even working in conjunction with what I'm doing. It's just like it's just talking to me, but it's not saying anything that's relevant to anything that I'm doing. And it starts to, preload me with all this BS. It's just like, It's trying to tell me how he works for the gangs in the area, that he was handed technology by the United States government, who got it from the CIA, who got it from selling drugs, illegally because they couldn't, they didn't want to use taxpayer money. So they just found a way to sell drugs anyway on the side and make money. And they built this system. And now that they were handing it off to all these gang members, and gang members were charged with, torturing human beings with it, and harassing them. And I just thought it was the biggest, you know, ball of crap that I had ever heard. It's just like, why are you telling me all this? First off,
Mhm.
like, are you thinking I'm going to go down to the police station and be like, yo, the guy in my head just told me that the C, like, no. But looking at a lot of people actually make, these are the mistakes. Like, it literally, some people would actually try that. So, I'm scared. I'm worried. And as you start to react to this thing, and you start to go out and get into talking to medical, talking to the police, talking to your government, and you're in the early stages where you aren't armed with any type of understanding on how the communication system works, how it operates, you don't have a linguistic pattern of being able to speak about it or talk about it,
Yeah.
and you're only using the root based ways to explain it, which by
Yeah.
God, it should be that easy. Look, I can hear somebody talking to me.
Hmm.
I don't like it. But as soon as you start saying that to somebody, in our society,
Right.
we are literally wrapped up in the same cognitive dissonance ball. The moment I say something to you that you don't understand, your
Hmm.
brain does something automatic. It goes out into its entire memory network, and it finds the one thing that's closest to
Yes.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So if I tell you I hear a voice that nobody else can hear,
Yeah.
you're going to go straight to schizophrenia,
Hmm.
because that's really the only thing that 99% of the population
Correct.
understands.
Yes.
So, and this is where it gets to be scary, because right at that moment now, it's now working against you. You are now in a process of discrediting yourself. You are
Hmm.
now in a process where you are not coming with enough uh, clarity, enough understanding, enough. There's not even enough past
Yeah.
where you can point back and say, look, this happened, this, and now we're here.
It's just like this perfect way of putting you in an isolated hole or discrediting yourself by what moves you make with what's being done against you. It's
Yep.
this perfect little psyop that they built out, and to silence you, to make you feel like um, you even second guess yourself if you're going crazy. Nobody can understand or commute this because it's so there's nothing that people like you said can latch onto other than a mental illness, because that is what society has taught us.
And this is kind of where so I am still dealing with the residual effect,
Right.
because my personality, like, I'm actually, I like to consider myself smart. I'm intelligent. I'm wise. But the problem is when I know something, like, I'm not going to listen to anybody else. So what will end up being my saving grace in the end is me never shutting up about it and
Yeah.
just continuing to talk about it.
Yeah.
But what caused a lot of problems in the beginning
Hmm.
is me not keeping my mouth shut.
I
me
understand.
not
I
me
went
not
through that
picking
phase
my
myself too.
not
So yeah.
picking my battles, right? I needed to find a faster way to hunker down, and I needed to develop the right things before I started acting the way that I acted publicly. So,
Hmm.
and that's where this thing gave fuel for now most people, they don't really care about what happened in my past. So when I come to the table and I present this to people, when they get to see it all the way through, people are like, okay, this makes sense. I understand this. I can see this movement to here and this reaction back. But what people are starting to find out is I can't take this same thing and lay it in front of the guy that introduced me to all this. This is where it gets weird. The moment that we do the same thing with him, he becomes super violent, super wants out, super doesn't want anything to do with it, super can't have any, no, it's you're crazy, and that's what people are starting to wake up and see. Because if you can't have a logical conversation about, from point A to point B, if you can't sit down, and then you start to see how the psyop is used to discredit people. And the only way to discredit somebody is to stand on a hill and say he's crazy and then walk away from it. But you can never get that person and another person in a room to have an actual logical conversation. It won't hold up, especially when one side is literally willing to sit down and present his side of it. So, and this is the crux that we're starting to get into, and it's now in a court system. Well, it's about to be in a court system again. So there's a whole, oh man, this thing has turned into it's just a mess what this is about to be.
Well, of course, the person who is responsible for doing it to you wants to come out smelling like a rose, and the easiest thing that can be done is to just paint you as crazy and discredited, right?
That's kind of that's the long-term effect. And then I guess to hope or pray that just this thing would just take somebody out. I mean, I've seen some news reports, right? I've seen, I don't remember these gentlemen's name, but there was an army shooter that went out and
Mm-hmm.
got somebody at the Navy Yard.
Right, right.
Okay. So this guy was reporting hearing voices,
Mm-hmm.
microwave. I mean, he was saying all of it. Carved ELF into his gun and then went out and started murking people.
Yeah.
That's not a good outlet, but there are people who just don't deal with things the best way. And sometimes I'm one of them. Sometimes I got, in the past I've had a problem, I didn't deal with it correctly, and it became a bigger problem. And this thing can put a lot of psychological stress on a person by forcing them to have to try and understand how the world operates now that somebody can talk to you and depending on what they're saying.
Yeah.
And then when the other side of it is that nobody believes you, that isolation effect, that's enough to take, a mediocre mind and just make it pop. So it's no wonder that we're seeing these echoes of the extreme on the other side where someone's just not handling it correctly. And it's like, oh, I'm going to make a statement. And then, the world will figure this out in 15 more years. And, we'll all look back and be like, well, that didn't need to happen. But yeah.
Yeah, it really is. This experience will teach you a lot about yourself. You have the free will choice to make the next move on. Once you understand that what you're up against this Goliath of, nobody knows except for those that have experienced it and get it. So we're up against this big mountain, but more things are shifting in our favor. Things take time. These, like you said, more and more I am finding out there are all of these organized, crime groups, and so there is government involvement to some extent, and then they pass it over to all of these other third parties, I think, in a lot of cases. But we all have to know, like Robert Duncan said that there's hundreds of programs that relate to a targeted experience. And depending on which one you're a part of, it can vary from one TI to another TI's experience. Not everybody has auditory, some just have directed energy. There's just this combination of the gang stalking or the proxy stalking, the contract stalking. Again, to me, all of that is in that, where they try to condition you in your most vulnerable moment to take a hostile takeover of your mind, to sink in the anchoring, the emotional anchoring and the trauma anchoring, but into this. So
And
your
that,
experience too also evolved into more of the directed energy attacks, right?
well, went into it eventually got to the attacks, but right at this time when this guy, we're on that stage now where I'm now being talked to,
Mm-hmm.
that went on for 2 weeks, but it didn't decay. There was no silence after this moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is when things started to get weird because this slowly went into what I would say some people call it gang stalking, but I just saw it as street theater. So I don't
Yeah.
know, like the Japanese are phenomenal at this. They'll send 200 people running down an alley or running down the street, all pretending like they're running from something, and there's just one guy walking up the street, and he just turns around and starts running the other way because he's now part of like I'm just gonna run with them. But it's just a joke. So they're phenomenal with the pranks that they pull. But the voice, whoever was talking to me, started talking to me in a way that was aligning with what I was currently doing in my environmental situation. So I might be walking into a Starbucks and then it's going to tell me, you're not going to hold the door for her. So now at that moment, I literally heard this. So I turn around and grab the door real quick, but there's nobody behind me. Right. But by hearing the audio of that, I just, you know, it's like, darn. But then that slow seep in where some of the comments are now dealing with my direct involvement. And then eventually they started putting in the street theater. So it wasn't just telling me that we're watching you, but it was when somebody was in my 40-foot range of sight. And so as I'm being told we're watching you, that person's like,
Yeah.
okay, like now I'm in the Truman Show. I mean, that's exactly what I thought at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is wild. I couldn't believe that it was going to this point. But I don't know if the psyop was meant to put fear in me or but I really wasn't scared. I really didn't care what happened. Nothing to this. No, I didn't think anybody was going to actually hurt me. I thought that this was some kind of like cosmic prank by, an engineer who had a lot of cool friends or new people.
Yeah.
Remember, I still didn't know anything. I never heard of a TI. I didn't know about gang stalking. I didn't know that this world even existed. So at this point, all I have is a girl next to me who I now need to bridge this conversation with. Because it finally gotten to the point where I was like, okay, I need to talk to Candace about this at least. So I took the 20 years that I had in the audio industry. I took what I knew about parametric speakers and sound beaming because we use that in the theater world. So if you can't put a speaker behind you or you can't fill your room with speakers, we can set up a device that can just beam sound to all the locations and you can still have a theater. Even though you don't
Mm-hmm.
got speakers back there, you hear it back there. So I knew about all this technology. I was working with some of this and putting this into people's homes. So it wasn't a big deal. So I started to tell Candace, like, look, I I think someone's pranking me. I think someone's got some type of like beam technology and they're hitting me with it. And I'm trying to explain this to her, and I've got some street theater. I think it might be a gang that's doing this. All right. So when I tell Candace this, I'm expecting her to just be like, okay. But then she starts to pipe up and she's, like, oh my gosh, I've heard some weird audio things too. She's like, I was in I was in a place where it sounded windy, but then when I went outside, there was no wind. And so I was like, okay, so they might be messing with you too. And
Mm-hmm.
then she started to say that she had seen people like in a vehicle with a telephotic lens taking pictures of her, like through the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she used to hang out with paparazzi. So she knew what this looked like. And, you know, I was like, okay, like that's a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I didn't realize is that while I was kind of like this is my worry level,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what her worry level was, but this girl's worry level was shooting through the roof. She just wasn't exactly showing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then these pranks started to be directed at me. So all of a sudden I couldn't go into my storage facility. Like a gang member was literally stopping me from entering a storage facility. Like, you can't be here, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, this is like, I got the passcode, everything. Like, threatening to mace me and like
Mm-hmm.
throwing up gang signs and everything. It was so over the top bizarre. Like,
Yeah.
okay, fine, dude. Like, I won't come today. Like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But as I started to tell Candace about these problems, her worry kept going through the roof. And then this finally ended up in a climactic blowout special where I eventually was at the storage facility again, went inside. The audio is telling me like it's literally complaining now. I got this thing complaining to me like I lost my phone. I lost my phone. I don't know where I put it. It's just like, okay, whatever. Of course, I find a phone inside the facility, and as soon as I pick that phone up, now it's like, oh my God, you found my phone. It has all the evidence on it. We are in so trouble. Big, big, like, you have to give that phone back. It's the end of the world. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, you have one of the most sophisticated communication systems on the planet, and you decide to lose your phone. And what are you even doing in the building? Like, it was the dumbest thing I ever heard. But I decided
And
to
that
take the
phone
phone.
was in the storage facility that you
Yeah, I
visited.
found it in the bathroom, sitting right on top of where you would normally have it. Yeah.
So they
So
asked you to do something with the phone?
no, like they didn't ask me to do anything with the phone. They're just, I need that phone back. You have to give that back. But remember, I have not been told, I have never been seen or shown that I can talk back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There is nothing that has shown me yet that I have the ability to also talk and produce the sound.
But
Like
you
none
had
of that's
experienced that two-way communication before, right? They did
no.
respond to you.
The
No.
only time that that happened was at the very beginning. There was
Mm.
the long delay, but I was speaking out loud. I was
Oh,
actually saying why out loud.
okay.
So I wasn't even at that level yet of understanding how a covert bidirectional neural communication system actually works. And they weren't just coming out the gate with this. This is all is a pancake layer on top of layer on top of layer. But me being stubborn and them wanting, I guess they were just trying to cause so much stress to separate me and Candace. But I wanted to go take that phone back to the office because I did the math in my head instantaneously. Like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to take the phone that has the orgy of evidence on it,
Mm-hmm.
and and I'm going to present it to the police and tell them that the man behind the curtain that's talking to me needs this. It wasn't it wasn't feasible. I was just going to return the phone. You can come and pick it up during business hours, except the office was closed. So this is my mistake. I take the phone and I go back to Candace and I'm like, look, apparently I found their phone and it has all this information on it, and we can we can take care of this gang, and we can but we just got to figure out how to do it correctly. And now I'm literally uh, I'm playing along at this point with the skit that they have provided. And this is where it got out of hand because I don't think anybody realized when we were doing all of this, I don't think anybody ever realized or cared where Candace was in all of this. Like, I was okay screwing around with all this. I kind of knew, where it came from, where it was going. I mean, in the end, I was going to either have to tell her or not tell her. Like, that's where the break was going to be. But when Candace got the phone, she was a great girlfriend. I mean, she was like, okay, honey, it's just like, we'll figure this out. And she put the phone in her purse. So now she's got the phone. Then they send somebody from across the street to actually confront me and Candace in that moment. And he wants the phone back. He's like, I need the phone back. And I mean, we're talking like long black curly hair, gang member esque. I'm not going to say like, people look like gang members, but not necessarily the guy that you would want to mess with. But in that moment, with this guy coming out of the building, I'm already strategically looking at this as there's no way he could have even known it was me with a phone. So he already has to be part of the surveillance. So I tell Candace to run to a police officer. It's not a police officer, he was a private guard. He had a semi automatic weapon. He was guarding a weed factory in downtown LA. But simply put, the guy had a semi-automatic weapon. So I told Candace to run, and this is when I knew I screwed up because how fast she reacted. I've never seen a human being react that fast in my entire life. Like, this is beyond Deion Sanders. This is beyond speed shooting. This is just that girl just darted, and that's when I knew that like there was a real sense of fear in her. So I was like, crap, now I have to deal with that in my head. But then I just turned back to the guy and I was like, so what are you going to do now? You know? And he took off in a completely different direction. So it's just like, okay, now I'm dealing with a guy running in a completely different direction who wants his phone and he knows I have it. I got my girlfriend now running towards the, armed security guard and defense with the phone and no one's following her. eh, and this guy isn't going to stay with me, like I would just, go to the police and like,
You
look, this
think
guy stole
that
my.
he was trying to get your prints on it? It was a setup.
I think this is just the
Just
nobody,
the
nobody put it together. I don't know what their end goal was, other than
it didn't
comedic.
go as planned, and he needed to abort mission,
It
right?
didn't go as planned because
Right.
here's the end result. She goes to the cop. The cop won't protect her because it's not a cop; it's an armed security guard. She goes into a panic attack. I go over to her to deal with her. And in the few minutes that I'm trying to deal with her, the guy that came to me is now in the storage facility in the second window looking down across the street at me. And he's like pulling out the James Bond gun. Like, ew. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, oh, this is great. I'm going to go ahead and press this issue. So I pick up my phone and I just call the LAPD and I tell them, like, look, there's a guy in a window. He's threatening me and my girl. Like, you got to go get him. So the LAPD shows up.
Wow.
This is where it gets real crazy. LAPD shows up. I tell them what's going on. And the LAPD, I mean, they went full bore. I couldn't even believe it. They were going, they were already getting SWAT on the phone. They were staging. They were literally going to go into that building and get that guy. But then all of a sudden it came to the point where they had to make a phone call and they had to get permission from the owner of the building to go in. And the owner of the building didn't give permission. So then the police they couldn't do anything. And when Candace found out that the police couldn't do anything, she thought that it had arrived at a moment where we were now indefensible, that we didn't have any protection. So she used her American Airlines, her privileges, and she flew us all the way to the other side of the country. Like, this emergency exit required the LAPD to escort us to Union Station. Union Station, we got on the bus while the police basically escorted us to LAX. LAX, from at that point, we got handed over to Lawa police. And this is where I met Officer Pedregon. This guy's amazing. I love this guy. I think Candace, if anybody ever got to hear the story where she starts to add in on this, she loved that guy too. But Officer Pedregon basically watched over us because remember, this is all happening during COVID. So Officer Pedregon's watching over us at the airport until the security gates open in the morning so that we can go into high security section and board the flight, and we're going to Miami. During all of that, the gap between the time I was at Union Station to the gap at LAX, there was no more communication from this thing. But while I was at LAX, and this is where people need to see how some of these gigs and gimmicks work.
Mm-hmm.
While I was at LAX, they wanted me to, not get on the plane, to convince Candace that everything was going to be okay, and they just wanted the phone back and that we didn't have to go to Miami. So there was a sense of urgency coming through this system of how this problem had rapidly developed. But then, I wasn't going to do anything. Then they decided that they wanted to talk to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? We need to talk to you so that you could talk back to us. We left the phone downstairs for you. So I was like, what the heck? So I bite. Tell Candace will be right back. I go downstairs. I'm looking around. They tell me the phone's going to be over there, plugged into the wall. I find the phone. It's plugged into the wall, and it's right next to a chair, a booth sitting on the wall. So I just sit down on the booth and I just stare at the phone. And sure enough, the actual owner of the phone who was charging his phone just comes over and shows up and is looking at me like, "Why are you looking at my phone?"
Why are you looking at my phone? Wow.
That's the gimmick, right?
Yeah.
Now,
The
what
bait and
happens?
switch. Yeah.
I pick the phone up. Person now is like freaking out. I get in trouble with security. There's friction there. This is how they do this. And I mean, it's just constant. So smart enough not to fall for that. Go back to Candace. We go to Miami. The very last skit that they played between us going through security and it ended wheels up. Like, this thing was able to target me all the way through high security and while I'm on the plane. But at wheels up, the skit was that they were now in a parking garage at LAX. The equipment that was capable of targeting me was in the back of the van, and they were in a standoff with Lawa police. And I'm listening to all of this in like background noise. There's even a shootout that they added. But the one thing that didn't make any sense is right at the end when the audio cut out, it went. And being in the audio industry for as long as I have been, that sound should have never existed because that's what happens when an amplifier sends a distorted signal to a speaker, and that's the very last dying breath that the speaker makes.
Mm-hmm.
But none of those pieces were involved in the audio production in my head. So what they basically did is they, like a movie, they just add audio script to support a reality that your mind is going to be willing to attach to.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess some movies, right? If you see, like, there was a movie where they had burgers falling from the sky and it was raining burgers. Okay, somebody doesn't take a burger and throw it on the ground to get that noise. They find another way to make the noise. So sometimes thunder in movies is like they'll take a
Yeah.
right. It's all stage production. So
Mm-hmm.
what they were using was a sound that was generally understood by the population as the end of something,
Mm-hmm.
but they added it to a place and they did it to a guy that knew that wrong sound, buddy. You know. So and this is where it started to dawn on me, like these types of tactics, these types of this isn't something that somebody just dreamt up overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody has spent a lot of time not only building a system that interacts with our body, but they've also spent a lot of time understanding the psychological warfare aspect of how this is all going to work on somebody.
Right.
And it's it's I want to say it's impressive, but we humanity has enough problems as it is. We should be working on those problems and not, making people suffer. So
Yes, that's correct. So when was we're about at an hour and 30. When was the next escalation moment that you had? So you went to Miami, I'm assuming, with
we,
Candace.
I took Candace and she flew us out to Miami, and then I kept us out there for a month. I mean, I just heck, why not? I was in
Mhm.
Miami now.
So
You
you were
know,
free of anything, any harassment during that time?
once Wheels Up, that was the end of it.
That was the end of it until
Like
you
this
came
was one of
back.
the long pauses.
Hmm.
So I mean, Candace was in a heap of not trouble, but you have to understand that once Lawwell was involved and the LAPD handed us off to Lawwell, that got American Airlines, which is her employer, involved, and that also got FAA involved. Because at
Hmm.
the end of the day, if they're going to put this girl on a plane, this is kind of the mindset that's going on in the back of these people. If we have a gang related problem that's targeting a flight attendant who is responsible for 300 lives on an aircraft, what is the risk here of putting this girl in, steel cannon with these people? And these are all things that have to be weighed out. Like they have to assess the threat. They have to understand all this. So it's just like as we were out in Miami just trying to let this thing blow over, this whole problem was building. And then Candace had to come back and actually give answers. And I think what everybody started to realize is, oh, we screwed up. Like we applied the pressure to the wrong person. So because I never heard this was the long pause. This is one of the long pauses. Nothing happened. I came all the way back. She dealt with all this crap. And then afterwards, um, this whole series like took almost 2 months, I think. And then it wasn't me that got attacked. Then they attacked the woman that I had slept with. They went after Dawn because out of nowhere, Dawn calls me and is saying all the things like she's worried. And you have to understand, Dawn was a religious person, so she believed in angels, she believed in God, and she basically was like, Griff, I don't know how to explain this to you, but I got angels talking to me, and God's promising me this wonderful life. She started telling me that she had these unbelievably vivid dreams, like dreams that she had never had before in her entire life.
Hmm.
Now, I didn't know about this, but yes, the system can do visual audio too.
Right.
So, or visual. So, but I didn't know this yet, right? I'm just picking this up. But she's telling me all the things that I've already dealt with. She's telling me about the audio. And she's banking on, she's worried because she knows that God doesn't do this. God doesn't talk this way. God doesn't operate this way.
Hmm.
And I, man, I did the exact same thing in order to try and keep Candace that the CIA and the Central Intelligence Agencies did to everybody else. And it worked like a charm, but it sucks, hindsight 2020. So, but I just told her, oh, sounds like you have a mental problem, right? I was like, I'm your friend, but I don't know what to do. I never heard of this before. This is all new to me because I already understood at that point the gambit. Tell Dawn the truth. Dawn then tells Candace, and then it all comes out. So again, I'm pressing against this, what they want. They're pressing back in ways to make it happen that doesn't require the system being talked about. And after I deflected Dawn, that's when they came back like a week later and they physically wanted a yes or no if I was going to tell Candace. And I gave them the thumbs down and that was it. Bam. Now we're back to pain. And pain wasn't going to stop until I made the decision, the right decision, which was the right decision. And I think I put up with that for about 2 minutes. An enemy I cannot see, an enemy with unlimited range, an enemy that can talk to me, understands, what's going on in my environment, who can also inflict the feeling of pain, agony, just literally lock you down and yeah, I literally went right inside. I told Candace, the truth, and I mean that schism right there. That's what ended it all. Candace immediately got on a plane the next day, flew to Texas, and I was to never see her again. They tortured me for just a few more days, but then at the end of it, I had my stipulations: don't ever talk to Candace again, and don't ever try to tell anybody what happened because nobody's going to believe you. And when I agreed to those stipulations, then my parting gift, I'm not even joking, my parting gift was we're going to play a game. And so I was like, okay, great. What's the game? And we played pick a number for like 2.5 hours. And I was amazed because I'm not even joking. Any number I thought in my head, they could pick it. It's just like a seven. And then 1 to 10 didn't work for me anymore. So we went 1 to 100. And then I worked them all the way up to 1 to we're in 5 digits. And
Yeah.
that's when they basically called it. And I even tried not to pick a number. And they called me on that too. So
They were
at
just
that,
letting you know what it was capable of.
kind
Yeah.
of like a parting screw you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead and stew on that for a while. And then
Yeah.
after that, you know, then there was nothing. They actually left me alone. And as far as we have a whole nother wave of things to
Right.
because that was only yeah, that was only 2020. We're in the early stage of, you know, 2020, probably March or April right now.
I mean, what's really unique to your experience is that you had moments of, you know, experience. And I think other people may have had the moments of a break and then they come back. But yours was very choice driven and it's like a psychological chess that they were playing with you and then playing with you, making you do things, thinking, oh, okay, here's this phone and it's plugged in and it belonged to somebody else. So it really is like this cat and mouse kind of way that they toy with us. And
Correct.
it's just, it's part of how all of this operates. And from your experience, obviously there were third parties involved that were enlisted or hired by, some entity that had the ability to do it with the equipment. So you
I mean,
had all of
at
this.
their level that they operated it at, I could pull the same crap with my friends. Like, you. I'm just gonna use you for today. I
Hmm.
just need you to go over here, do this, do this, do this, do this.
Yeah, theater, get some gift
Right.
cards, some incentive. They're
Is
like,
it just
sure,
something?
just
Because they
believe.
didn't. There wasn't enough manpower.
Yeah.
I never saw more than maybe 5 or 6 total people, different people that were apparently in on it. So that's not a lot of people. And these people weren't in orbit of me 24/7. But this is what people have to kind of understand. One of the stipulations was after Candace left, I had to give the phone back. So I took the phone out of her purse while she was asleep, and I went outside, and they wanted me to put it like they wanted me to put it in a like a mailbox or something, but I didn't want that. I put it in a bush. Like it's like that's what you get. You get it in a bush, and
Mhm.
then I walked away, and I made sure that I had a mental understanding of the terrain that I was in, the area I was in, but I only gave them 45 seconds of me being out of sight of that phone. And as soon as that 45 seconds expired, I hauled ass back to that bush, and that phone was gone. So, if you think about this, it's not hard to have somebody close by just in that one moment to grab a phone and get back. Heck, that person could have gone to a car and came back, could have gone into any house and came back. That person could literally be just right around the corner. I'm never going to find them. But the psychological impact of putting someone near someone that they know is part of this, they only have to do it one time. You could pay a guy $10 to go and do it once, and that stain is stained in the mind of that person forever. Like they could be anywhere at any time. It could be that person. It could be that person. It could be that person. And then the voice doesn't even need the actor to be part of it. If that voice tells you, oh, stop looking at me, and you're staring at a girl in red, it's just like now all of a sudden you think that that girl might actually be a part of this. She's just a girl in there trying to eat a sandwich and go through her day. But they can make you think that it's part of their stage because they did it to you once. And this is where it gets out of hand because then you have people attacking people. You have people, that just it's it's a psychological mess is what this thing can do. But people just need to be aware of the strategies, the levels that the system can operate at, because not everybody is at a certain level, right? I'm already at the what I would consider end stage. Like I have full blown use of the communication system. It's just there to harass me, but I've seen almost every little gambit along the way.
Mhm.
There's no more torture other than the physical pain. I have to deal with 30 hits a day, basically, is my dose. And I mean, it's just enough not to take me off my feet, but none of it lasts more than, 15, 20 seconds. And it's just, that's the steady reminder. And is it livable through? Yeah. I'm going to a neurologist. Dr. Len Bear is actually going to sit in with me on my first neurological visit, but I'm about to go through that stage. I have to find out if there's any damage and if there's any way to detect any of this, or that's where I'm at with this. But
Yes. Yes, it just it's a lot. And I had extensive testing done last year. I do have vestibular damage from all the hits that I've taken over the years. So definitely that we have to try to do our best to kind of counter for our body and these attacks in forms of supplement or nutrient or things that we can do to cognitively do what to reverse some of this if we can. Some of it we get hit so hard and it builds up over time. But I think this is a good place because now on the next episode, the next visit that you have with the chosen heroes, you can go back in because for viewers to know that Candace does come back into the picture eventually, right?
yeah, she does.
So and then, well, it's like, did you stay together or did you not? So these are all the answers. And then the escalation again of what happened this next iteration once you did reconnect with Candace and what you went through that has led, to where you are right now too. And of, you know, the for Dawn as well, because you had told her that it was
We
all
can't
the.
find Dawn. Like, I've tried to
Mhm.
reach out to Dawn's family, and to find Dawn. I have not been able to locate Dawn. I have not been able to. She has literally fallen off the radar. So I have no idea, and this is what kind of is upsetting. I don't know where Dawn is or how long that this affected her. But if we could find Dawn, right? If we start to pull all these people back into one room, there's a lot that's going to come out from it. But I have no idea where Dawn is. I have not been able to locate Dawn. I have talked to Dawn's family. When I first broached the subject with Dawn's brother, I believe, Dawn's brother is a straight shooter. I mean, he was just like, look, you were messing around with my sister. All this bad stuff happened. If you're saying it's attached to it, then, you shouldn't have anything to do with my sister. And he just severed the tie. And I respect that. Like, but I don't think that they understand completely, but a lot of windows that I would try and use, I can't find Dawn. She's not on social media. She's not. Um, I don't know what's going on with her.
And
But
it could be that she just is separating herself from where it had occurred, right? And that being knowing you and your reaction to her when she confided in you. It could be she's just staying in isolation away from it to not repeat things, which is understandable. These are scary things that are happening, and we hope for her sake that it did end, and it's not continued. It's just interesting how the people behind these things will start pulling in your family. They can attack your family. They can attack
yeah,
people that are associated with you. And it's just like, they've got the keys to do these things, and they misuse them, and they don't think twice for what they do. So this this will be good. So let's go ahead. Let me see. We've got some comments going on here before we wrap up, and because, like I said, to those tuning in or just now tuning in, this is going to be a multi-series, because as you can tell by Griffin's experience, it's unique, and there were a lot of players involved in a lot of different circumstances. Some to it unique that I haven't experienced myself personally, but it does tell you that it's not a cookie cutter experience. It could be, it's just different flavors, and there's different players, right? Um, of how all this forms together. But what we do know is we're all experiencing it as, targeted individuals in one way or another. And when we share our stories, then we are, number one, supporting one another and giving that, confirmation that this really is happening. This is for real. And the majority of the public is yet to catch up to this, but things are in motion that are making this more so with all that is going on in this world today. We have learned in the last several months that there has been a deep veil covered of corruption and deception, and we are getting, the general public and all of us are getting introduced to the fact that all that was said was not truly what was occurring, and that's on a global front, and we're
yeah,
part of that whole veil. And for there to be, okay, these weapons exist and they're being used on civilians. That is one that they are dancing away from, because they were aware, the powers that be are aware that these weapons exist and they're being used on civilians. That's a hard pill to swallow without more pandemonium occurring, right? So
yeah.
this is going to be a
It's
delicate dance of how things
it,
unfold.
it's a civil liberties problem. That's for sure.
And there are things in place right now where there is eyes on the surveillance being done on civilians. But again, still not dancing on the directed energy weapons being used on civilians within the surveillance of the civilians. So we just need, it's hard when you're getting hit by directed energy, you're getting auditory effect, but you have to know that just remain strong and don't lose hope, because we're all in it together. So let's go ahead.
Did you want me to answer questions? I need to just walk away from the terminal for like 2 seconds,
No
and I will be
worries, no
right back.
worries. I'm going to go ahead and bring up some that may be directed toward me while you do that. All right, community. I'm just reading through some of these. When I read some of these comments, I mean, we are all going through so much of the similar thing, and it's just tough for us, but don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. And because we know that as experience have taught us, there's no quick fix to this. We've got to allow time and ways for God to move. We've got to do our part. We got to use our voice. We got to be supportive to one another and not tearing each other down. That's part of the psyop, attacking each other. So we need to be supportive to each other. So if anyone has specific questions for Griffen, if you would just go ahead and type those in, please. Here's one for Battle for Your Brain. He says the government is planting TIs with BCI. So what is your thoughts on the brain computer interface? Griffen, can you hear me? Did you lose audio? He's checking his audio now.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay.
So
my
my
earpiece is dead.
That's okay. So what is your thoughts on the BCIs, the brain computer interface, in the government implanting them? In your case, do you think you're implanted?
No, from all the research that I've done, from everything that I have experienced and how it's been presented to me, there is no, well, I'm not saying there is no implant, but I am not in that field. So everything that's how our bodies work, it can all be done wirelessly. When you look at frequency and you look at the absolute ability to separate, look at a computer, for example. This is my best way of putting it. A computer runs off of electricity. So, but all of that electricity runs at different frequencies. And they do this so that the fields that these electrical lines produce don't bleed into other things. And the human body is basically the same way. The brain is processing the auditory, it's processing the visual, it's processing scent and taste and touch. And all of these signals are going in, and they're going in different patterns, in different frequencies, and it's all separated but organized compactly and tightly. I think they just got to the point where they can work with this. And you can always look back to what we know. When Dr. Alan Frey found out that electromagnetic radiation could stimulate hearing, it wasn't the fact that he found, oh, look, radiation can stimulate hearing. What people miss is it can selectively stimulate hearing. That wave wasn't affecting any other part of the sensory process other than hearing. And what people haven't realized, I mean, they took all the equipment away from Frey. They're like, go ahead and finish your work without it. And then they just left him they obviously figured out that if they could do it for hearing, we could do it for visual. Like there's probably a whole
And
another
pain, mimicking, getting into the pain frequencies.
right. So now you get into the fun part about the human brain. Sound is a perception, and you have a sound field. So you hear birds in the distance, you hear things up close, you hear it, left and right, and it's all in a field. Well, your visual field is a field, and pain is a field. So when I touch my toe down here or I touch my pinky, I feel it there. But if you cut off a person's arm and you put an electrode in their brain and you click a button, you can get them to feel like somebody is touching a part of their body that doesn't exist. And you also have amputees who will swear up and down, bro, sometimes I feel pain in my arm and it's not there. It's because how the brain builds this perception. So when you're a targeted individual and you end up taking a hit, like a poke or a pinch, and you
Mm-hmm.
feel it on your right side,
Mm-hmm.
early stages, if you don't understand how the brain relates to feeling, you may think that somebody off to your right might have thrown something at you or hit you with a directed energy. It doesn't have to work that way. As long as you can get the brain to process the signal that it would determine pain right here as being, then you're going to feel pain right there. It's the same way you can make somebody feel like their flesh is on fire, but not actually deliver the damage to the cells on the body. You can just send the signal to the brain, have it process it, and voila, you have the sensation or the perception of heat with no heat. And
And there are some that have the radiation burns
oh
as
yeah, I
well.
mean, some
I
people
mean,
have actually been. I just
yeah.
don't have
Yes, I mean,
right.
it's all about that different flavors of the experience because I think they test out different ways to attack us and
Absolutely.
how the human mind and the human psyche will respond to those attacks. So, and then again, it's just this big collective data bank of all of the many, many flavors of torture and psychological manipulation and testing to build out this greater, more perfecting the craft of the weaponry that is being used
If we
in
do it
these
right,
experiences.
if mankind does it right, this thing, whatever, because right now, this is what the truth of it is. We have a technology that was built in secret, and it's
Hmm.
in a place where there is no accountability. And when you have human beings in areas with no accountability,
Hmm.
bad behavior is
Yeah,
prevalent.
yeah,
So that's just the nut and bolts of why we're having to deal with it. This is where all human rights abuses come from. This you can't stop me, and I'm just going to do this, and that's how it
yeah. And they get this false sense of God and that they have power over some being, right? Or
is.
people that they can do and their emotional trauma. Let's say that they were, you know, bullied or whatever as a child, and that all of that pain and suffering that individual is going through is driving the bus, going, look at what I can do now. You know,
I
there's so many things when people misuse power and control and hurt other people and have no conscience in doing so, you know.
But on the other side of this, we are absolutely looking at the birth of a whole new stage of humanity. Because you have to understand something. If this system can do the things that it's doing right now, if it allows me to communicate without moving my mouth, if it's aware of my presence and kind of like, what's going on, in my orbit, in my world. And you tie this into just if you take government, what if everybody that even decided to work for government, the American people said, you can't be a government employee unless you're attached to this system because we want accountability? Or what if we took it one step farther and we just said, you know what, if you're an American citizen, you're part of this system. The court system, as we know it today, wouldn't even exist. The speed at which justice could be dealt with would be so unbelievable and so reliable if it was done correctly that, I mean, no one would have that worry anymore. We wouldn't even have missing children. I mean, the second that you wanted to know where your kid was, this system could literally just, don't worry, Janie is 22 feet away from you. You know, she's fine. You know, her stress levels are whatever. She doesn't feel like she's scared or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could tell you, like, look, Janie just fell into the pool. Right, you're a mom doing laundry. Your kid just fell into the pool. You have a number one most amazing network in place that could alert you to a problem and get you to be the first responder and deal with it. Like it really has that capability, that all-seeing, all-knowing capability. But the problem is people with power, that's a threat. What if I can't buy a judge off?
Yeah.
What if I can't give money to an arms deal in Israel? What if I can't smuggle weapons? What if I can't bring drugs? What if I can't? What? That is the threat that needs to be dealt with, because this thing literally gives you the ability to do those things.
That's true. I mean, you looking at it from both sides of that, look at its capability and how it could be very helpful and beneficial yet on. But when there is people in charge of such powerful weapon, I mean, it can be a weapon or it can be a blessing, right? Like you said, finding a missing child.
Didn't trust me. This is never going back in the box, right? Either humanity is going to say, like, we're not ready for it, accept it, and ban it,
Mm.
and then it's going underground, or humanity is going to find a way to integrate it. But this thing isn't going away. This thing is like, if it wasn't doing the things that it was doing to me, I would just go out and buy this. If this was an actual, like, we want to buy the new iPhone, well, it's going to plug into your brain and allow you to do things. It's just like, I think it's pretty cool. You know, I just don't need it yelling at me, talking to me. I don't need it doing police swatting. I don't need it like torturing me. I just sure as heck don't want my iPhone to like zap me 30 times a day. So these are the abuse things that need to be wound out about it. And I'm scared because when I go to the neurologist, you know, I don't want to find out that this thing has damaged me. But it doesn't, I don't feel like it has. So if it is safe to use, why not be able to call your mom you know, inside your head and have that type of hands-free? Why not be able to? But these are all questions that humanity has to deal with, and we have to deal with it together. And until everybody starts to get on page with actually having discussions like this and not calling people crazy, because that's where we're at.
Yeah.
We need to have real talks. Are, you know, kids coming out of high school need to start literally thinking about what a world would be like, what the ethics are involved with wireless communication, human to human, or human to cell tower to human, or human to satellite to human. You know, fish swim in water. Well, we swim in a sea of an electromagnetic radiation, and we're getting to the point where we can manipulate that radiation. So it all has to come out at some point. But we have
Yes,
a
without
lot of
proper governance, there will always be an abuse. And this this should be the part where the hand is forced to have protections in place, true protections, not just lip service, because we've had enough lip service to last multiple lifetimes, right? That we have come to find out that everything we thought and believed, it wasn't necessarily the case. And there just needs to be a moral compass that comes back. And I really don't believe that moral compass will happen without the God's intervention on this. They stepped out and saying that, okay, we're about truth and transparency, yet, we've had little crumbs with no follow-up. So here we go. So I think things are going to be really moving in this month. I just kind of feel it in my bones. And for the rest of this year, we're going to continue to see these waves. So we need to stay strong. We need to stay centered. We need to reconcile our heart and ourselves. And
2025 is the year of the comebacks. This is kind of what, with my group of friends, Trump became president. Like, that was one heck of a comeback. It's just, I'm now in this court proceeding. If this goes the right way, he actually stands to, he's looking at jail time if the judges look at it the way that I'm looking at it. So it's just, I don't know. I'm hoping Tulsi goes up in there. I'm hoping that Cash or Pash, what's the FBI director's name?
Cash Patel.
Cash. I hope these people have a real desire to try and bring this out. And I also understand the national security side. I get it to a certain degree. You guys have a toy, and you have that toy in use probably in other places of the world, and it's not, you can't just pull the rug out, so to speak, without endangering all these missions and whatnot. But at the end of the day,
it shouldn't be used on civilians that are innocent.
Exactly. It's just like, can somebody just get up there and pull the plug?
Yeah, I mean, but we're feeding the research, so. And there's there's been donations and funding for that research, right? But nobody told us, non-consenting test subjects, that we were going to be used as an experiment, whether it be by a handshake, a nod, or a wink, of people who had those connections to enroll us into this madness that we are living and breathing on a 24/7. So. We just have to keep raising our voice. That's why on social media, we continue to go out there and we post and we tag those that are in power that can hopefully hear our cries and, stop this injustice and civil violations on our life and our health and our bodies and give us some restoration from what has been done to us because of this madness. You just cannot be experimenting on people and continuing to do these things without the hammer falling. This is a time in the season where I think the hammer will fall, because if we leave it up to man to have to come clean for the atrocities that have been done, then it's like, oh, we'll give you a crumb here and there.
Well, I'm already guilty of that. Right. I did not want to tell Candace, and I figured, but now we're gone the rest of my life, but they weren't going to have that. So as right there, it just shows force has to be applied in some fashion to get movement. No one's going to come off of a position of power, or, if they have something, they're not going to just relinquish it without getting shoved in the right direction.
That's right. It has to be a nudging. Yes. And I think God will be the nudging, Well, I appreciate you joining in today.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
Yes. Everyone stay tuned. There'll be a follow-up with Griffen. And so we can continue with the story unfolding where Candace re-enters his life again, and what transpired thereafter, and all this leading up in this. He has done such extensive research on these technologies too, and as you could witness from his articulation, and and in some of what he stated today about that. So we'll get more of that too. But again, it's we can get through this. We have to recognize for, you know, the motives and agendas and the tactics that are being used so that we can, you know, strengthen and armor ourselves, knowing what we're up against. And sharing these stories is how we build our armor as we do our own due diligence and work for ourselves, because we're defeating these AI technologies that are ravaging in their little chatterbox ways and the shenanigans of the street theater and all that is being done, directed energy toward us. We just have to keep moving and pressing forward. We cannot recall, we cannot relent, we cannot crawl in a hole. We have to get up and we have to fight. So stay tuned, everybody, for the next appearance for Griffen. And again, thank you so much for your courage and sharing your story with us today. And
Thank
God
you.
bless
God
everyone.
bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much.